Today we're going to be sewing on a button. So you have your rubric sheet. Down at the bottom of the sheet, I want you to fold up the paper just so that we can still see teacher score. So just fold it up like that. You're going to be sewing your button down along this bottom portion of the paper that's doubled up so it's less likely to rip. And this is going to be a great way to practice sewing on a button, have it on the rubric, be able to evaluate yourself when you're all done, and then turn it in to be graded. If you were sewing a button back onto your clothing, you of course would want to make sure that you line it up with the buttonhole. Hopefully you still have the matching button and you have matching thread. Sometimes that comes with the clothing when you buy it. Sometimes extra buttons are attached, like on a tag or on the inside of the shirt, or you just have to do your best to match it. Okay, for your thread, you're going to choose any color for our button today. It doesn't matter if it matches the button or not. So thread, when you're getting the right amount, start at your nose and stretch your arm all the way out. Okay, that's about how much thread you're going to need. And then you're going to thread the eye of the needle, which is the opening on the opposite end. And so you'll just want to carefully thread, hold the thread as close, now it's kind of hard to see there, but as close to the tail as you can. If it starts to fray or ravel, you may need to trim the end to get it to go through the eye. And you're going to take this tail and you're going to meet it up with the other tail. Okay, so you're going to tie a knot down here where these two tails meet, opposite end of the needle. Okay, so we have the needle on one side, you have the tail, that'll have the knot on the other side. Now there are some different ways you can tie a knot. If you remember the method from 6th grade to get your knot in the end, you can certainly use that. I use a different method, one that my mom had taught me when I was younger, that works for me. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my thread, I'm going to wrap it around these two fingers, and I'm going to bring it around and cross it over so that I can tuck it through. And I'll show you this again. And when I slide it off, I get this little loop that I can pull and create a knot. Now I want to get my knot as close to the end as possible, but I need two knots here. And so I'm going to take my end again, wrap it around these two fingers, cross it over. Okay, so you can see it's crossed over here, and then tuck it through so that when I slide it off, this little circle here, I can move. I can slide down here if I need to. And I want to line it up so that my previous knot is going to be right in the middle. And then as I pull it, sometimes they go right next to each other. Sometimes you get them together. But you know your knot is big enough when it doesn't go through the paper, or if you were doing this on your shirt, through the fabric. And so if I take my paper and I push my needle through towards the front, then on the back side, when my knot gets to the paper, as long as it doesn't go through the paper, it's a big enough knot. If it did go through the paper, I'd need to add one more. Okay. Okay, now I'm going to take my button and put it through the needle and bring it all the way to my paper. Okay, I have a 4-hole button here. You could also use a 2-hole button if that was available. And the buttons that have any words or detail, like this is kind of indented here in the middle, it's got a little edge to it, that's the part that you'd see. The flat, smooth side is what's going to go against your paper or your fabric. So I came up through one of the holes. Now I'm going to go down through a different hole. And you can decide the pattern. Okay, I'm going to just crisscross my stitches. Some students have stitching that's parallel. But now I need to come back up through one of the other openings and back down through the other one. So I've gone through each hole once now. Okay, and you always want to make sure that you're getting those threads to come all the way through so that it's nice and tight and secure. On the back side, you just want to make sure that your stitching is nice and smooth and that you're not getting any extra knots in there. Alright, so now I need to come back up through the first hole. Okay, so I'm coming up through the first hole, and I do the same process again. For our activity, you need to go through each hole at least 3 times. If I was doing this on an item of clothing at home, I would probably do it maybe 4, 5, 6 times, depending on the button, how much it gets used. You know, if it's on my pants and it's going to get used more often than maybe a button on a shirt that I may or may not even use, I'm going to end up sewing it several extra times because I don't want it to come out again. Okay. Go through each one more time to complete the process. And then we're going to create something called a thread shank, and that's on your rubric sheet. Your thread shank is something that helps lift the button up just a little bit so that it isn't so tight against your fabric, and that way you can get the buttonhole around it. So for this one, I'm going to take my needle and I'm going to bring it up between the button and the paper. Okay, so you can see I'm not going through one of the buttonholes. I'm coming up between the button and the paper. I'm going to pull that through, and then I'm just going to take my thread and I'm going to wrap it around the base of the button. And as I'm doing that, I'm going to do that maybe 5 or 6 times. Now to help secure it, I'm going to sew through that thread that I wrapped around it. I know it's a little hard to see, but underneath here is where I wrap that thread around. And I'm just going to take my needle and go straight through that thread. So I'm not going through the button, I'm not going through the paper, I'm just going through that thread that I wrapped around. See, it's just going right underneath the button. Okay, and I'm going to do that twice, and again, that's helping to secure the button. My final step is just to secure it with a knot. So I'm going to take my needle and I'm going to go back down between the button and the paper. Okay, so I'm not going through any of the buttonholes. I'm coming back down here through the back side. Okay, so again on the front, the only stitches are through the buttonholes in the middle. Okay, now on the back side, I have some stitches here, some flat stitches. So to tie my knot, I'm going to go under those stitches, and then I'm going to bring my needle through, and I get this little loop right here. So I'm going to go under the stitches, through the loop. Okay, I'm going to do that about 3 times to create a knot, make it nice and secure. Under the stitches, through the loop, and one more time, under the stitches, through the loop. Okay, to create a nice and secure knot. These extra tails of thread now are just going to be trimmed off. So I'm going to cut those. Okay, and I can cut them all the way down so that you don't have any long tails of thread anymore. And then I can look on my rubric and see how I did. I can look at the thread shank. I made a secure thread shank. It's not loose. I can't see any thread sticking out from the edges here. It is secured. Now don't try and tug on your button to see if it's secure, because we don't want to pull it off the paper, but it shouldn't be hanging loosely off the paper. So this button is secure on here. And then the appearance. So is it neat on both the front and the back? This button is neat on the front and the back because there are no threads over the edge of the button, over the edge of the paper, and it's neat on the back because I trimmed off all of those threads. So once you've completed it and you've graded yourself, you'll turn it in for me to grade.